care of the physical and mental well-being. So today, I'd like to thank you very much for participating. My name is Amanda Dakouré. I'm a senior legal counsel at the African Development Bank, and I will be your moderator. So before we start, I would like to thank the Institute for African Women in Law for organizing this webinar that will touch a very important topic. To know more about the Institute, you can visit their website, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, even Twitter. I would also like to thank the Commonwealth Lawyers Association for kindly sponsoring this event, without which this would not be possible. So I have the pleasure to welcome, as panelists, Ms. Akosua Mark-Oke, who is an organizational psychologist and CEO of Crossbridge Consult. Also, Judge Monica Moyoni, Principal Judge of the East African Court of Justice, and Nana Ama Bachwe, founder and managing partner of N. Dauna & Co. So since we have a very short time together today, I won't go in detail on their stellar profiles of each of these three ladies. However, please feel free to visit their LinkedIn profiles to know more about each of them. So let's dive into today's topic: self-care for women in law, taking care of the physical and mental well-being. So the last few years we've seen an increase in national discourse around mental health, especially during the ongoing pandemic. However, more conversations are needed with specific regards to individual health at work, specifically mental health for women professionals. So whilst there are more companies that discuss the importance of physical health for work productivity, some argue that there needs to be more of a discourse on the importance of mental health at work. Additionally, there is greater need to consider how being female or a minority at your workplace can affect your health. So this panel will discuss what mental health is, what is the essential to take care of your mental and physical health, and the benefits of doing so for yourself and your career. And the panelists will discuss this in relation to women working in the legal profession. So now let's get started. My first question will be directed to Akosua. What is mental health, and why is it important for women to prioritize mental and physical health in the field of law?
Thank you, Amanda, and hello to everybody. I'd like to use the WHO definition for mental well-being, which says that it is a state of well-being where the individual, and that's very key, the individual realizes their own abilities so that they can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively, and be able to make a contribution to their community. Now, there's some key words here in understanding the definition. And simply put, mental well-being is the well-being of the way you think, the way you feel, the way you relate. And therefore, you will know how to cope with stresses, relationships that you have in your normal lifestyle. So that's what I'll say for the definition. And if we look at why it is important because it's globally recognized. If you look at the SDG 3.4, it talks about the well-being and the health of people, and actually the promotion of mental health. So that's one reason. The other reason is that knowing about mental well-being is a preventive activity to be able to know what is happening before it degenerates. So it's preventive, it's important. And then, of course, I would say that health, physical and mental health, are two sides of a coin. I think we're doing well with the physical, where workplaces are providing gyms or giving vouchers for people to go into gyms and so on. But very little is said about the mental well-being. And I think that's important as it's becoming obvious with this new normal that we live with. So that is what I would say. It's important to be able to work productively.
Thank you, Akisua. Now we know how important it is. So my second question is to Monica. Do you think mental and physical health are topics that legal institutions prioritize in their policy and practices? And if they are not prioritized in the workplace, what can be done to change that?
I'll give a brief background to that before I answer the question directly. In the legal background that I'm familiar with, especially the judicial background, the nature of work of judges is extremely stressful. It's extremely stressful. And then with women, there is a lot of pressure to deliver. Competence is important, and the female judges, vis-a-vis their male counterparts, tend to be under a lot of pressure to deliver. Now, having said that, it seems to me that judiciaries emphasize judicial outputs a lot more than the well-being of the judges. There's a lot more emphasis on delivery of justice to the people that access the courts than the well-being of this judge who has to deal with a criminal trial, deal with witnesses, experience the witnesses' pain, go through the victim's experience with them in court, and ultimately winds up traumatized. Not much is being said about this judge's emotional well-being. Having been a criminal law judge myself, you are faced on a daily with witnesses as young as 3-5 years that have been, say, defiled. And as a mother, automatically you get involved in the case, and it has its ripple effect in terms of your well-being. I often found myself thinking, this could be my child. And that alone is very traumatic. So I think a lot more can be done. I hardly see any interventions that address the judges. The interventions that are seen tend to be for the welfare of the witnesses, the welfare of the victims. There's not much being done to the judge or the lawyer, because a defense lawyer is also exposed to the experience of this victim. So a lot more needs to be done in that area. Personally, I do not see a lot being done right now.
Okay, thank you very much, Monica. My third question is for Nana Ama. We often tend to think that women professionals are immune from mental health or gender-based violence. Can you share with us why women professionals are silent victims? What can be done to address this shadow pandemic of sexual harassment of women in law?
Sorry, could you repeat that? I missed most of it. I think you were cutting in and out.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'll repeat the question. We often tend to think that women professionals are immune from mental health or gender-biased violence. Can you share with us why women professionals are silent victims? And what can be done to address the shadow pandemic of sexual harassment of women in law?
Thank you so much, Amanda. Gosh, that is such an interesting and a difficult question. I think that women are often silent because sexual harassment in this area is particularly threatening. So your physical and mental well-being is threatened. But in addition to that, your financial well-being is potentially threatened. So if for example, you're in the workplace and you're being sexually harassed by a superior or a colleague, in our part of the world, if you're not fortunate and you're not in a culture where, that sort of thing is taken seriously, you could be risking your job in addition to, suffering these other traumas. So I think that's one reason why women are silent. The other reason is that very often still, and it surprises me that this is the case, but this is a generalization, of course, but very often still in some of our societies, when a woman is a victim of sexual violence or sexual harassment, very often there is the tendency to want to blame the woman. So if, for example, and this is a real example, if, for example, you go to the office of some regulator and then decides to counter you or do something against your will, the first question, if you go and share the story, the first question that either people will ask or the first thing that will go through their minds is, well, what did you do to provoke that? And so, there is and this comes from both men and women, sadly. So there is a reticence to talk about it because oftentimes the woman is blamed still in our societies. And then there is the additional concern that your professional reputation would be besmirched if you are victimized. So I think these are some of the things that we're dealing with. You risk losing your job, you risk losing your professional standing, and you risk losing sometimes even personal relationships. Because people are concerned that if you report the man, he could be in trouble and he could lose his job and so on and so forth. So it is a very difficult thing that I think most female lawyers are navigating daily.
Okay, thank you, Nana Ama. My next question is for Akosua. What are the initial telltale signs of a mental breakdown at the workplace?
Okay, so I think that before I answer that, I'd like to say that even though there's a generality of women issues across professions, with the legal space, the lawyer is supposed to have the unique purpose of, making sure that society keeps the moral sanctity in terms of, it also has a history of being a special profession in terms of its history in administrating justice. But coming back to looking at the symptoms, I don't know if we will look at the causes that bring up these symptoms in the legal space. But before that, maybe I'll just talk about the symptoms. So if we look at the symptoms, I think that I generally put them under the heading SAD, S-A-D. Now, the symptoms are stress, and then I'll go on to show you or tell you some of the things that show that you're under stress, and then the things that cause you prolonged periods of anxiety. And then the D would be things that really get bad until you are depressed, okay? And so if we look at the symptoms under S, which is the stresses, and Judge Monica just talked about the experience of being even emotionally involved in a particular case. You're human, you can't, detach yourself from that. that comes with its own stress. And then, of course, we have the stress of generally, because we didn't talk about the causes, maybe that would have helped, but generally thinking of blaming yourself, like Nanama just said, in certain situations, that guilt that you carry, and then you turn around and kind of, I don't want to be victimized, and so I'd rather play the victim so that nobody touches me. Some kind of passive avoidance behavior that you begin to exhibit in your law firm. And then when you realize that you are restless and you are worrying unnecessarily, you know yourself, you know your baseline. And so when you begin to think that I'm having a lot of episodes or a pattern of not sleeping well, worrying, and you're tired, unusually tired. I'm not supposed to be fatigued. What have I done? And I feel fatigued. And then sometimes it actually exhibits itself in physical phenomena, like your back and your shoulders are always tense and aching, and you're having unexplained headaches. Those all come under the stress part of it. And then if we take the anxiety part of it, we can talk about, people say things like, I don't seem to think straight these days. There's a confusion about your thinking, about concentrating, about focusing. You're easily distracted. Now, all these things are normal. It happens occasionally to everybody, but I'm talking about frequency and prolonged states when you find that this is happening to you. And then, of course, we look at the inability to cope with daily activities. You used to be fine, and your time, you thought was well spent. But now you end the day and you're not quite sure exactly what you did, and then you are fatigued. So if that is happening very often, that is a symptom of that you need to look at. And sometimes we even begin to feel that we are supernatural. We have magical powers to be able to cope with these things that are coming up, and all kinds of thoughts go through. So when you go through these unusual thoughts, it is a time for you to look at yourself or ask for help. Lastly, I'd like to talk about the D, which is prolonged depression. All of a sudden, you see that, or people comment that you have changed. Oh, you used to be so bubbly. Why? What is happening with you? How come you're so quiet? You tend to want to pull away from people, isolate yourself. You'd rather be by yourself. And then, of course, you're thinking about, you get easily irritated and angry. Your personality is beginning to change. Even your eating and your sleeping patterns begin to change. You can't sleep at night for no reason. And sometimes you're fine, sometimes you're not. If this is over a prolonged period, it's time for you to ask for help. So for you to remember this easily, remember SAD, S-A-D. There's a stress, there's, there's anxiety, and then there's depression. So let's keep this in mind. Now, this can happen to anybody. I'm telling you that with all my knowledge on this, a couple of years ago, and like 3 years ago, I actually went into this. Now, I'm supposed to know the symptoms. I'm supposed to know but it took about 8 months, and which is a type of depression called the Impostor Syndrome, which happens to high-level achievers, where you begin to feel that, look, what have I done? And I haven't done anything. What's all this noise being made about? And then slowly you begin to disengage with things that you would normally do. So that is it for the sad aspects of it. I hope that helps with the symptoms.
No, that's excellent. It will definitely help us identify when your mental and physical health are at risk. So I'll ask you a follow-up question. As a psychologist, can you provide our listeners with 3 or 4 practical solutions for taking care of their mental and physical well-being in order not to get to that sad state?
Yes. Now, it's very, very important. There are very little, you might think, insignificant things that I'm going to say, but I can assure you that they are very important in breaking your thought processes that are letting you slide. Now, this is important also because we generally have about 60,000 thoughts per day that run through our heads. Now, 95% to 98% is a repetition of what went through your head yesterday. So it is the 2 or 5% that you have to work with to break that cycle of thoughts that are just going through your mind. So, and I think we can all do this together, because when you actually break these cycles and begin to replace them with positive things, you actually release chemicals in your brain that can help you to increase your positive mood. So it's very important. Simple, insignificant, obvious, but do it. Don't just learn it, do it. So let's do this together. So first, you sit and you relax in whatever space that you have. And then you begin to first admit to yourself that you need a change, that something is wrong. If you don't admit to yourself that something is wrong, all that we're going to say is not going to happen. But you have to find that strength in yourself to say, this is not me. I think something is going wrong. Okay? So now when you sit and do that, it's important for you to then breathe. I know most of you have heard this before, but it is important. Breathe deep breaths 3 or 4 times. Just breathe. Now, why it's important for you to breathe is that when you breathe slowly, it actually calms you down because it's lowering your heart rate and your blood pressure. Just that little breathing that you might do 5 times or 3 times. So now you've got your breathing. You also, it's interesting how God breathed into us. It gives you energy. It gives you life, okay? Then, now that you have settled down, I'd want you to think about how you're feeling. You know, it's easy to go through the day and not stay in touch with yourself, and you're just kind of floating through and coping with whatever is coming, whether or not you're coping well, you really don't know. But this is slowing you down to help you run faster, so to speak. And so slow down with your breathing and then look around you. Look around you. Look for 3 things. It could be the chair. It could be a window. But concentrate on them, just 3 things, and find out what's beautiful about them. What is different about this chair that I see every day? What I'm trying to get you to do at that point is to focus. If you focus, you see, everybody has a limited amount of energy, and that energy must be used optimally. And you scatter that energy by doing unnecessary or thinking about unnecessary things. But when you focus and concentrate on your surroundings, okay, instead of concentrating on things that are past or things that have not yet happened, concentrate on what is, is around you. Now, when you see these 3 objects and you look at the positive things about them, now be quiet and see if you can hear some sounds. 3 sounds you can identify around you. There might be some birds outside your window. The air conditioner might be on. But again, you are focusing. focusing your energy. You are moving it away from negativity. And then, of course, you can also do the 3 parts or move 3 parts of your body. You can choose your fingers, your toes. But again, you are bringing your energy to the present and moving it away from the past or the future that has not happened. So 2 more, I would say that when you have done this, decide, who can I talk to that I trust? Now, the trust bit is very, very important, because you don't want people walking around, oh, I think there's something wrong with lawyer so-and-so and judge so-and-so because she came and spoke to me. So be careful who you go to. But it is important that you actually engage with somebody, talk about it. It's a therapy as you begin to hear other points of view and people support you. And then again, relationships, once you have that engagement, it gives you a sense of belonging, a sense of self-worth. There's somebody who can listen to me. I can also support somebody someday. You're beginning to lift yourself up. And you can add this by actually, you know, for those of you who know the story of Snow White, you know, the witch would go to the mirror, mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest? And the mirror would say, you are the fairest. And then everything was fine until Snow White came into the picture. Now, we must be able to talk to ourselves about who we are. If we haven't bothered, please take a sheet of paper and write all the positive things about yourself. No matter what you think is trivial, you could not have become a lawyer if you were not, you were nobody. You studied for it, you practiced from it, and so on. So write all the good things about yourself, your inner self, your values, your physical self, and so on. And then one of the key things is to try and keep looking good. One of the things of the symptoms of sliding down is that you begin to neglect how you look. So make sure you're looking good. You are not tempted to just, oh, it doesn't matter, let me go off this way and that way. No, you have to be able to think positively. And then learn something different or do something different. It doesn't matter. Even as you're sitting now, you can decide to drive on a different route to your house. Because don't forget, you're trying to break that automatic pattern that is giving you or letting you slide. So as soon as you do something different, in your brain, the pathways change. It is as fantastic as that. Just doing something different. You create or rewire your brain. And then if you keep doing those little different things and talking to different people, the rewiring, you know, goes on. And then lastly, I would just want to say that be kind, you know, be kind and to somebody, just be kind to, just give something to somebody. Be thankful to somebody, call somebody who's been good to you. And just talk to them. And when you give something to somebody, it is a gift. It is a gift. And that person's smile and thank you will be mirrored in yourself to be able to pull yourself up. So these are just quick tips. Of course, if it's more serious than this, then you have to go through some formal therapy. But remember that it's important to do this. So I think these quick tips should help us along to break the cycle before we really go into more serious states. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you very much, Akuswa. My next question is for Monica. Monica, what roles should judiciary play in promoting the physical and mental well-being of their women employees?
Thank you, My first sense would be to create some sort of support groups. What we have in many judiciaries, I think, are loose groupings. You'll have the Women Judges Association. You'll probably have the little groupings, say, the Criminal Division judges, the Land Law Division judges, Court of Appeal judges, Supreme Court judges. Those are loose, fairly loose groupings, but they are useful because this is your first point of contact. So these social groupings could be strengthened in such a way that there is a sort of peer support group. What we usually see is when a judge is in trouble, say that she's not meeting her targets, or for some reason she's violated some of the judicial ethics, then the first point of call are the peer groups. They'll probably, if you're a high court judge, you'll probably get a senior high court judge to talk to you before it escalates to disciplinary proceedings. So I think those sort of peer groups could be used to support judges as well. So that's one option. The second option could be, and that's what many judiciaries are considering, a sort of social club for judges. The nature of the work that judges do, they are sort of removed from society. They can't mingle as freely as other professionals. So they tend to be recluses. They leave office or they leave the courtroom and go home, and it's simply office and home and the occasional hospital and that kind of thing. So that alone is depressing. While if one created, say, a gym for judges, a sort of setup where judges can go do exercise and socialize within themselves, let their hair down within themselves, that would help. I recall some advice I received from a superior once who told me, if you take yourself too seriously here, you will get a nervous breakdown. So he encouraged, have little parties amongst yourselves. Just have a little party, you invite your close judicial friends and a few friends that you trust, and let your hair down. I think the most important message is the ability to de-stress. Give the judges an opportunity to de-stress. And that is what is lacking in most judiciaries. In most of these places, it's about work, 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 and deliverables, deliverables, deliverables. We do not do much. And unfortunately, the nature of the job, these are leaders of sorts. They are leaders in their own right. So everybody is busy feeling sort of important and too important to be ill. It's assumed you've got yourself so together, you can't have mental issues. So I think there is a lot of cover up. And the sort of support groups, loose support groups I'm talking about, would help judges open up and share their experiences with each other. The Women Judges Associations have tried, but I think, as Akosa said, there is a question of trust. Trust is important. These are very sensitive issues. Nobody is going to open up. For instance, we've had many, as women judges, you tend to be a high profile person. That affects many social relationships, including marital relationships. And the offshoot of that could be depression, both clinical or otherwise. Now, very few judges will be willing to open up about these sort of issues. They sort of sweep them under the carpet. And there must be opportunities for them to talk about them. I think it's really social support for the judges. There's not much else you can do. And then the judges themselves must be encouraged to look for ways of de-stressing. It's important to belong to some sort of gym. We are not, that the jury is still out there about membership to clubs and golf clubs and things like that. The conservative judges think that is a no-go area. The more liberal judges think the judiciaries should be able to support and finance judges' activities in that area. So the jury is still out there. It's neither here nor there. However, an individual judge, if they are sure they can exercise restraint in terms of who they interact with in these clubs, can go out there if it's a way of coping. I think it's really about the individual first, thinking about their coping mechanisms, and then the institution reaching out to support these individual measures. That's more or less what I would say about that.
Thank you so much, Monica. That is well noted. I hope that this message will be sent to the judiciary so that they can help their women employees. So my next question is for Nana Ama. What roles should law firms and the legal institutions play in promoting the physical and mental well-being of their women employees?
Thanks, Amanda. I think it's very important that law firms and legal institutions, first of all, create an environment in which both men and women feel safe to report incidents of harassment or assault. So I think creating an environment in which there is openness, in which there are structures that are designed to deal with these issues, as both Kosia and Honorable Mugenyi have indicated. These are very sensitive issues, and there's a lot of stigma around it. And so having the right sorts of structures, internal structures, where people are confident that confidentiality will be respected and matters will be investigated fairly is very important. I think it's also very important for our organizations to invest in training and sensitization. I think there is a lot of ignorance amongst men and women about what constitutes sexual harassment, less so about what is sexual assault. But even there, I think there's a great need for education and training of men and women. And because I think a lot of the time there tends to be different levels of understanding about people's actions, people's words, and what creates maybe what feels like a hostile environment for women. And so I would say creating the right structures so that reporting and discussion can happen in a fair and safe and organized way, and training people so that we are all aware of the kinds of behaviors, the kinds of words that are problematic, and training beyond, what is legally sexual harassment, training on softer issues about what sorts of things can create a difficult environment for women. But beyond that, I think it's important for organizations to look beyond, their own internal workings, and to promote the fight against sexual harassment and assault in the wider society. So I think if more organizations were to stand up and to support women, or to support people who allege that they have suffered sexual harassment, I think that it would also be very helpful in setting the tone in the larger society. I don't know if that answers you.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much, Nana Ama. So just maybe one quick last question for Akusua. If you could please quickly recommend additional resources our listeners can consult to help address mental and physical health concerns.
Yes, what I spoke about is what we call the first level support, which is you as an individual taking control. You might be in a situation where you can't do that. You have actually gone down, and then we go to the next level of support, like Judge Monica said, about structures. There must be structures or systems that I know it's safe to go to, which is outside of me. And so most workplaces now have a mental workplace system in place, so you can go to that particular person or groups of people who are trained to take care of these mental things. Because don't forget that it is actually affecting performance and productivity, the very essence for which you are at the workplace. And then also, apart from having a workplace support, some countries also, I don't know what is happening in other countries, but in Ghana, for example, you could go to the Ghana Psychological Council and they will direct you, as you could call them, and they direct you. There are also a lot of individual consultants. And again, I'm speaking about Ghana because that is what I know of, that you could get if you Google mental health, and you will find some people you can go to. In fact, some of them even have a free hotline on all the networks. You can call, and then it's directed, and they get in touch with you. And indeed, with all our work in organizations that I have done in the past 30 years or so, I have experienced people in workplaces who are virtually desperate, and they tend to try to hide because people shouldn't be seen as being desperate. And something that I call the boiling frog syndrome, where you know the heat is up, but you kind of, go along with it because you don't want people to talk about you, or people to think that you are incapable of coping. And then we become flozzies, what I call flozzies in organizations, because then everything is given to you, you're doing it, you don't know how to say no. We have to learn to be assertive but not aggressive. It's very important about what I can do, and if it's too much for me, I should be able to air it. But because, especially in the legal space, you're doing either a tutelage or it's a profession that is very hierarchical, seniority. You're thinking about all those things, and you're trying to prove yourself as a woman. And if you don't take care, then you fall into this flossy or boiling frog syndrome, and before you know it, you've gone up. So workplace, first yourself, support systems that may be at the workplace, look for wider individuals who are doing that in the community. And in fact, in Ghana, I'm just about to open a whole center on about an acre of land. And what we're doing and dedicating it to is to organizations. It's called the Center for Psychological and Emotional Wellness. Now, we are careful about the name because we don't want the stigma. And then it's a little bit out of Accra. So you can you can go to our website and find a little bit more about it. But it's important that you find somewhere, and that's what we provide. We are clinical psychologists, the organizational psychologists, educational psychologists, Gestalt practitioners, and medical doctors, so that you come into this place and you drive in, it's like you're going into a hotel or a lodge. So nobody really thinks much about it, but you get help. So that is what I can say of the different levels of support that you have.
Okay, thank you so much, Shakusu. I'm sure that will help our audience. So before we actually move to the Q&A, we will do a quick poll. So if we can launch the poll, that would be great. Okay, so the poll is up. Results are coming in. There's 5 questions. perhaps we can move to the answers once we have at least maybe 60 people that have participated. We're at 30%. So 60% would be great.
Amanda, while we're doing that, I had a question.
Yes.
Akosia said something, and I think it would be useful for her to clarify a little bit. Akosia, you said that women should be assertive, but not aggressive. Now, this is something that is potentially quite provocative. I have my firm is predominantly women, and I spend a lot of time trying to get them to speak up and to be more assertive. And I think there is a great concern about being aggressive. And from what I see, we're so far from being aggressive. But when we hear the be assertive but not aggressive, I find that it can have a sort of a silencing impact for some people's. But it would be helpful to hear from you on what you think is the difference.
Okay. Now, it's when we talk about aggression, we tend to think about saying something loudly, and it's a normal instinctive reaction of fight or flight. However, because we want a particular result, we must manage how we say it to make sure it happens. And so when we are saying assertive, we are saying make your point, say what you would like to happen. All right. So if I'm being given work all the time, everybody, because it's Akosia, she will do it, but then it's getting beyond me. I should be able to say in a quiet way that I'm sorry, I can't do it. And in the beginning, it will be rough because everybody's used to saying or hearing you say yes. You don't even know how to say no. But let's say it in such a way that the person clearly understands what we don't like and what we would like to happen. And sometimes when we speak and we are angry and we're shouting and so on, we don't get the effect because a person mirrors our behavior and doesn't quite hear us. So that is what I mean by being assertive and not aggressive. It is in terms of the behavior that is exhibited to get what I want. I don't know if that helps you, Nanama.
It does. But what do you do with the anger then? Because there's a lot of justifiable anger.
Yes. I mean, and that's the whole thing about knowing yourself. We say that when you don't know yourself or you're not in awareness of yourself, you're like a loose cannon killing everybody along the way, and whilst you get what you want. And so the anger is there. It's important to express the anger in another space, all right? Because if you express it in the space in which you're engaging with the person one-on-one, you probably will not get the results that you are looking for. And everybody says, oh, don't mind her. She's always angry with the whole world and so on. No, that's not what you want. You want them to know exactly what you don't like and exactly what you want. And it can be said in such a manner. But that is where anger management comes in. And sometimes we do need to have anger management, because don't forget that when emotion comes in, reason flies out of the window. So how do we calibrate these energies that are in us that has to be vented out? Because if we keep it in too, it has its own, negative effects on our bodies, not other people who are irritating or taking advantage of us. Nanama.
Oh, I mean, I just thought we would have a chat during the poll. I think the poll is up now, but so thank you.
Okay then.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, so perhaps we can, are the results shown to everyone, or should I share the results? Okay, well, I'll read the first question. Have you ever experienced any sexual harassment at your workplace? And 28% have answered yes. 67 have answered no, and 6% not sure. Actually, there's not only sexual harassment, there are a lot of different types of harassment, and sometimes we're not aware that we are victims of harassment, even sexual harassment. So that's an interesting question. And for the people that answered not sure, even the fact that you have to wonder might be an indication that you have been a victim. But that's it's important. Some institutions do have some tools to help you learn and about harassment, but to also help you identify if you are being a victim of harassment. The second question: do you experience any acts of omissions at work that affect your mental health and well-being? And so 72% answered yes, 19% answered no, and 8% not sure. The third question: have you ever sought support for your mental well-being? 28% said yes, and 72% said no. So hopefully at the end of this webinar, you'll have better tools to seek help for the 72% that said no. For question number 4, if you had an opportunity to receive support for your mental well-being, would you take advantage of it? 81% said yes, 3% said no, and 17% said maybe. So this is on our institutions, our workplaces, to provide these support systems so that we can take advantage of them, because clearly most people would have taken advantage of it. And the last question: what type of support would you like to receive? 67% said counseling, 56% policies at the workplace, 58% peer support, 31% ability to report the abuse to a superior, and 33% ability to seek legal redress. So we don't have a lot of time left. So perhaps we can start by taking one question from the audience. We will, you can write it down in the chat box, and we will pick a question. If there are no questions, I'll give you maybe 30 more seconds to maybe write down the question, or you can maybe jump in if it's quicker. Unmute and ask your question. Okay, so we have one question addressed to Akosua. She mentioned impostor syndrome, and if you can please elaborate more on this syndrome. It seems to be an overarching issue which women can fall prey to.
Yes, the imposter syndrome is an interesting condition because it happens to people who are achievers, and you would think that they would not fall prey to that, but it's a kind of burnout, you know. And with why it's called imposter is the feeling that all that you have achieved, you're being an imposter. It's not real. It wasn't. Was this really you? Was it because you did it, or because somebody else did it? You know, you go through all that chain, and if you don't stop that train of thought, slowly, and it's so slow. Don't forget, I said it happened to me. It took me like 8 months, to pull out of it. And you get disengaged with what you would normally do and achieve. And especially creative people who can easily just think of solutions, it's like you're a pretender, you're an imposter, and all this fluffing you have about you is just fluff. They're not real. But that is why you need to be able to, in the beginning, I said, everybody write down what is great about you, what is good and positive about you, because that's your anchor. You go back there to say, yes, this person said I am so and so, something negative, and then you go back there to denegate it. Remember, you are what you think. Your thinking drives your emotions and your behavior. And so if you break that thought or that trend and you begin to rewire the thoughts in your brain, slowly it comes back. But you need support. I was lucky to have a group of people who supported and noticed that something was going wrong. And another thing that we should all do is we must be willing to ask for help. Sometimes, like Judge Monica said, especially when we're lawyers and we're seen as prestigious people, and you don't want to go and ask, you have to go for help. Apart from the stigma aspect of it, you must be willing to reach out to somebody. So that's what I'd have to say about that, the imposters. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. That was clear. Thank you so much. We have one more question. If your mental health has been affected in the past, how do you recover or redeem your self-esteem? Anyone can answer that question.
Okay, I'll leave that for somebody to answer. If not, then I'll answer.
Okay.
Well, I am far from a professional on these matters, but I think that it's important to do all of the things that Akosua mentioned, and to recognize that it's a process. And whilst you are getting the help that you need, to keep putting one foot in front of the other. And for me, there is something very powerful about, getting back up and putting yourself back out there when you have been through something that is particularly challenging. So for me, I think it's important to, and I want to be clear that what I'm saying is not to keep pushing yourself to do things that are going to further traumatize you or are weakening you, but to make sure that you get the support. But whilst you're getting the support, not feeling that you have to wait till you feel that you are 100% recovered, but taking baby steps along the way to put yourself out there and to keep going. That has helped me a great deal.
If I could come in here, I personally think we are our own first doctors. We're our own first help. So if one is recovering from a mental illness, it's important that they, having gone through the help and the treatment and everything, they start to speak to themselves. You can only be what you think of yourself. So as Amanda, I think it was, I don't recall whether it was Amanda or Akosua, but I think it starts with the baby steps, but then you must do self-counseling. You must speak to yourself and tell yourself, yes, this has happened. Keep it real. Be honest with yourself. I think it's dangerous to live in sort of make-believe. If it has happened, it has happened. Now pick yourself up from that place and tell yourself, I can do this. I have done this in the past. It's sort of taking stock of what you've been able to do in the past and telling yourself, I can still do it. Because things happen. We need to learn to look at mental health like any other illness. You get malaria, you are treated, it does not affect your self-esteem. So similarly, this is an illness like any other. You have beaten it, congratulations. Now you pick yourself up from that position and start to move forward. It would be nice, I think, to start with simpler tasks and work upwards towards the more complicated tasks. In terms of the legal profession, we need to fight the stigma. You know, lawyers are supposed to be the A-class achievers, but they need to learn that even the A-class achievers do get issues. They fall ill, they get physical ailments. So mental illness is an ailment like any other. Counsel yourself and move on from where you are. It's important to just keep going, as has been said, just keep going. Because in life happens, and life happens to everybody. There is a tendency for high achievers to be unable to handle these limitations. And that's where half the problem is. But they must learn to keep speaking to themselves. I learned something early on in my life. We were sort of counseled when we came into the judiciary. And we were told you've got to learn to be grateful for something, just one thing daily. Every single day, take stock of the one thing you are grateful for that day. Whether it's beautiful weather, whether it's an excellent judgment that you've written or a beautiful legal brief, whether it's somebody has gifted you something, just be grateful for something. With time, it increases the positivity in your circumstances. So that's what I would say for somebody that is trying to get back their self-esteem.
Okay, thank you so much. Nana Ama, I see you raised your hand.
Yes, just one last thing. The other thing is, I think as Akosia said, it's important to talk about it. And so finding a trusted friend and sharing. I have found that, I mean, oftentimes we think this is only happening to us and we're unique and, you know, we're ashamed and we are hiding. And there is nothing more powerful than sharing something that has happened to you with a trusted friend or a professional. And oftentimes you will hear them sharing stories as well. And it's great to know that you're not alone. And it's also very empowering to feel acceptance and love when you share whatever has happened to you, and the terrible negative reaction that you were expecting doesn't actually occur. So sharing and not keeping it to yourself and isolating yourself and feeling the shame in your own corner.
That's true. Talking about it is very important. We have another question from the audience, from Adeola. And this question is directed to Akuswa to kindly share tips for dealing with pressure in the workplace. The type of pressure from internal, external forces that always ask you to show up and deliver, even in the midst of extreme burnout. And there's also just a follow-up question on that, to also include tips on work balance with home pressure.
Amanda, can I just say something quickly? That we are women and we do things differently. Whatever challenges come our way, let's redefine these challenges and work with them. There is nothing at all called, stress, anxiety, and all that. There's nothing like that. No situation. It is we who interpret them as being stressful and being anxious. And let's learn to be mindful and aware of ourselves in the present and stop dwelling in the past or even looking into the future. Because it's a false evidence. Fear is a false evidence of things that are not real. It hasn't happened yet, and yet we believe that it's not going to be well. And then as soon as you tell yourself that, your brain accepts it, your brain does not know what is real and what is imagination. So be careful what you put in your mind. Please have time for yourselves, me time, where you affirm yourselves and think of the good things that you are and God has created you for, and what you have done in your community and in your practice. Then you will not let the past or the future hold you victim, because you have trillions of cells in your brain that makes you unique and special, and no one can tell you that you are not adequate and that you are a victim. It is all in your mind. Train your mind to see yourself differently, and you will be different. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you. So time has run out, but I'll just, before I conclude, I'll let the panelists take 1 minute each just to give their final remarks, please. We can start with Monica.
Okay. At the end of the day, we each represent a personal brand. We each are a special brand that no other person can be. So we must continue to remind ourselves of what about our brand is unique, is special, and makes us who we are. And we must learn to celebrate ourselves. Regardless of whether anybody else is celebrating us, we must learn to celebrate ourselves. And what do I mean by this? Whenever you have an accomplishment, celebrate each little accomplishment that you make. Nobody's going to cheer you on as well as you can cheer yourself. So be your first cheerleader rather than wait for others to cheer you on. Then in terms of work and home balance, we must know what we are able to do. We must be realistic with ourselves and know when to say no and know when to stop. We cannot be superwoman at home and expect to be superwoman at the workplace at the same time. There must be a give and take. If you have deadlines coming up at the workplace, cede some things at the home to somebody else. Learn to delegate. If there is something critical at the home front, then learn to delegate at the work front, or simply say, no, I have an issue at home and therefore I can't take on this assignment. I think it's important, as Akuswa said, to be respectfully assertive. Say what we must say it respectfully, and make sure we mean exactly what we are saying.
Thank you very much. And Nana Ama?
I would say it is super important for employers, law firms, companies to make sure that we are creating supportive environments for women, creating environments in which we talk about these sorts of issues with a sense of openness, and we learn from each other. And I say to all the women that it's important that we share our experiences, not indiscriminately, but as my colleagues have said, it's important to speak up, because oftentimes there are particular people who are, somebody who's victimized you, if you don't speak up, they get to victimize other people in addition to you. So find the courage, do the work that you need to do, but it's important to speak up, because that's the only way that we can change. I also think it's very, very important to have education, because not all of the perpetrators are just wicked people. Some of them are ignorant people, particularly when we're talking about sexual harassment and what can be considered verbal bullying and that sort of thing. So it's really important that we have these sorts of open conversations between men and women at home, in the workplace, and please speak up. Don't be ashamed. That's the only way we can move the needle.
Thank you so much. And Akosua, final remarks?
Okay. I think that what I'd like to say is that whether at home or at work, life is like an onion. And sometimes when you're peeling onions, it makes you cry. But when it makes you cry, wipe your tears away and move on. Sometimes life will become a game, play it. Sometimes it's a song, sing it. Sometimes it's a puzzle, unravel it. You determine what your mental state is. So begin to build this up. And this is a poem that I don't know who wrote it, but which I absolutely love. So remember that life, your life, is determined by you and not other people. Thank you.
Thank you. That's perfect. It's a good way to conclude. As you can all see, there's a lot to talk about on the topic of women's mental and physical health. And the main point that I retain today is that you cannot separate mental from physical health as well. They go hand in hand. And in order to excel personally and professionally, you need them both. There's still a lot to be done in the workplace. However, women need to speak up. And we learned that women need to be offered the adequate environment and protection to speak up and trust the structures and the system. So thank you so much to the Institute for African Women in Law, the Commonwealth Lawyers Association, and all the panelists and participants for contributing to this speaker series. Your contribution has been very insightful, and I hope it will have helped all of you learn how not to be sad, but to be happy. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you.